Upskilling. You might now think, well, what's upskilling? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. There are new studies available, the CEO study and the WEF, the World Economic Forum study, where we focus on upskilling as the key aspect you have to take care of to develop your company sustainably. Well, we now have to, all we know right now is that we have to fight for talent, and the fight for talent is ongoing. There is not even remotely in sight that this is going to get better. And PricewaterhouseCoopers did the annual CEO study about what are the major challenges, the major problems, the major situations you face, the major issues you see as a CEO to develop your company sustainably, successfully for the future. And of course, the World Economic Forum, the WEF, backs the whole aspect of this, the whole study of that, with their own data. So we're not talking about opinions here. If you disagree with what I say here, you disagree with facts, and that means you are in science denial, which is never a good look and also not a wise choice when you want to develop any organization into anything. One of the most important aspects for the future. However, what does that mean? And just to be sure, when I talk about the PwC, the PricewaterhouseCoopers CEO study about the major challenges and situations and issues we see, I'm going to put a link in the show notes of this podcast so you can read the full study. There is a lot more in there than I can mention in the short 10 to 15 minutes we have every week in our podcast. And what I mention here, the main issues I am going to talk about, are only the aspects which were mentioned under they will have influence to a large extent or to a very large extent on the future, towards the future of that organization. So we're only going to talk about the very and most important issues that we see in this today's free enterprise economic world. And of course, the same applies to the public service because they face the same sort of shortage of talent and workforce. Issue number one is seen with regulatory and compliance. And of course, we have a rising number which doesn't show a linear but an exponential growth on regulation. We have more rules in place. If you now say the solution to that is having less rules, good luck. There's not a single there's not a single aspect that points towards the direction of deregulation of markets. We will have more regulatory, more compliance in place. And of course, what do you need to do that? You need qualified people to fulfill the demands of a rising regulatory and compliance oriented world. The second aspect, which is a major challenge, is prioritization. You know that you have probably a lot of different aspects on your plate and you need to be able to prioritize, while at the same time getting straight to aspect number 3, you have limited resources. So you need to be able to fulfill all those limited resources, going to aspect number 5, while you have a workforce that often lacks certain skills that you need. Often employers complain where they say, we get some applicants, however, they lack the skills that we need. Going to the fifth aspect here, that they lack the tech abilities. Even if you want to work more efficiently, you need to know how to use certain tools. You need a certain affinity or at least a certain aspect of learning towards tech. And often people lack the skills they need here. Last but not least on that, on the top answers, number 6 is bureaucracy. Special greetings to Germany here, probably leader in Europe in bureaucracy. However, other countries aren't doing too much better. And of course, you need to be able to deal with bureaucracy. So you need to work very precisely because, you know, when you fail to address the issues of democracy, the only thing you get back is a letter where it says, sorry, you completed the form incorrectly. Please restart here. The question is, how do you deal with that? And if we look into this, what do you need for regulatory and compliance? You need people who learn, who are qualified to fulfill the demands of regulatory and compliance. When it comes to prioritization, what do we need? Well, people need to be able to prioritize from time management to task management to delegation to communication to conflict management to project management and whatnot else. They need to learn that. When we talk about limited resources, you need to talk about time management and multi-project management. All of that needs to be learned. Very obviously, the fourth aspect, the workforce skills that are lacking, you need to learn these skills. Number 5, the missing tech abilities, you need to learn these abilities. And number 6, you need to learn how to deal with bureaucracy because it's very sure that it's not going away. It is not going away any way soon. And of course, now some companies will immediately say, well, I think we do a lot for our employees. I just give you a couple of examples. And by the way, what I tell you now is a real world example. Some people say, well, we do a lot of health and safety training, and we do a lot of training on fire protection and about data protection and GDPR, and we also do all the first aid training, and people learn the SAP and ERP software that we use in our company. And of course, we also, for example, have communication and conflict management training. And all of what you just heard, from work health and safety to fire protection to data protection GDPR to first aid training to ERP software, for example, SAP, to communication and conflict management training, all of these 6, only one of them is a learning offer. And that is new to many organizations. We know that often when you claim you do so much for your employees, we have so many learning offers available, often the learning offers are not really learning offers, because most leaders, even senior executives, often struggle to define what is a learning offer. So we are going to define this before we get to the WEF, the World Economic Forum study, and their data on the matter. So what are the aspects you need to fulfill to have a learning offer? Number 1 is it must be voluntary. When you talk about health and safety, not voluntary. If someone says, oh, sorry, I'm not doing this training because I don't like it, it's a bit boring, you still send them there because, it's obligatory. If someone says fire protection, no, I've seen YouTube videos, I think I know all that. No, you have to do it. Data protection training, obligatory. First aid training, you need to have a certain number of people who are able to deliver first aid just in case. So all of these are not voluntary. So as soon as a training is not voluntary, it is not a learning offer. That is the first aspect, voluntariness. Anything you offer as a proper learning offer is voluntary. The second aspect, when you say, well, but the ERP model and the communication conflict management training, these are learning offers. Well, one of them is. The other one, not so much. Better to say, not at all. When you tell people you have to learn the ERP system, that's a system they need to master for work. It's basic qualification. You don't do it because you're such a nice human being. You don't do it because you're such a nice organization. You do it because people need to be able to fulfill the demands of the workplace in which, and that means you have certain expectations that they are able to master the software. And that means the second aspect is, are you able to transfer the knowledge to another organization? Of course, you could now claim, well, others, when we use SAP, others use SAP as well. Anyone who has used SAP for 15 minutes or longer knows that SAP or any good ERP software is highly tailored to your demands. And if you're unable to transfer the knowledge from A to B, for example, to another organization, then people will say, well, that's not really a learning offer. It is something I need for work. And they are right with claiming that. I'm a self-employed entrepreneur, so I'm not representing a workers' council here. I am always more pro-employer, obviously, so I have to display my own personal bias here. But when people learn something they need for work, please don't tell them, oh, we did so much for you. No, you didn't. You simply qualified them on a level that they need to be qualified. And learning an ERP module, for example, SAP, when you go to a different company, you will see the same software, which is then completely tailored to their demands. Processes are completely different. You nearly have to learn from scratch. Not 100%, but 95%, depending on the amount of tailoring that happened. So number 1, everything must be voluntary. Number 2, the knowledge needs to be transferable. And number 3, and that's the personal benefit. If all 3 get together, voluntary participation, transferability of knowledge, and personal benefit. When you, for example, take a class on communication and conflict management, you can use that absolutely anywhere. I give you an example. When you say communication and conflict management, you need that in the workplace. Yeah. And you need it at home. Correct. You need it in your football, golf, basketball, baseball, your dogs or children's sports club or wherever else. You need it as soon as you leave the house where you probably do not live on your own, or you at least have neighbors or some friends. So when you have anyone around you, you will see that communication and conflict management will have an advantage for you if you get additional training on that. So of all the aspects I mentioned, from work and safety to fire protection to data protection, GDPR to first aid, ERP module, and last but not least, the communication and conflict management training, only the last one is a learning offer because it combines 1, voluntary participation, 2, the knowledge can be transferred, and 3rd, there's a personal benefit. And One aspect I need to add, because I've seen it way too often now. When you, for example, pay for someone's bachelor's degree, master's degree, personal certification, if it's IT or out of IT certification, do not put them in front of a paper where you tell them, well, if you want to have that qualification and we pay for that, please sign this paper that you need to stay here for the next 2 years with no salary raise. If you still use these papers, I can tell you there is a lot bad stuff about that. I can give you, by the way, personal statements in a minute about people who faced that situation, what they did afterwards. And there are a couple of reasons why you shouldn't put people into the situation to say you have to tie yourself to the organization. Of course, you want that they stay, and it's your job to make them stay. If you tell them, sign this piece of paper so you must stay, you have a couple of issues here. Number one, you openly communicate that you do not trust them, because otherwise you wouldn't put this paper on the table. You openly communicate that you do not trust them at all. There might be many reasons for that. The question is, why do you then still qualify them if you obviously do not trust them? If you, for whatever reason, do not have trust in someone, then maybe you should think about this distrust, this level of mistrust probably is not a good foundation for a future relationship in a work setting. So number one, you openly communicate, you do not trust them when you put this piece of paper on the table where you say, tie yourself to the organization no matter what. The second aspect is, in Europe especially, we have the right to choose our employers wherever we want in the European Union. So please check if you're complying with the laws of your country. In most countries, you will not be compliant. And third, by the way, you cannot force people to work there. If you force someone to work with you when they are already in their mind quit with you, they will either call in sick or they will go to press or on social media and say, look, this is how this employer deals with me, and you're not going to win this discussion. So if you still have papers in place where people have to sign that they stay in the organization, stop doing that. It is simply bad leadership. You have to take care that their circumstances are good enough that they stay. And that is your job as a leader. Getting to the World Economic Forum, and I'm also going to put a link in the show notes so you can see the World Economic Forum studies as well. 49% of the people in the workforce at the moment are working in a field where they were not primarily qualified for. And that is good news. And of course, the message here is not that education is useless. People who have the formal qualification are productive a lot quicker. However, when you say, and there are certain fields where you can't show tolerances, when you have a dentist, someone cannot say, well, I watch a lot of YouTube videos and I really like to be a dentist, so where's my first patient? That wouldn't work. It is not possible. But in many other fields, you can have a certain flexibility. When people move into a certain field, you have more workforce available, which in most areas is a prerequisite to actually fulfill the needs of the workforce you have right now if you're not already understaffed while listening to this. 49% of the people working at the moment are working in a field where they were not primarily qualified for. That means you have to qualify them afterwards, because otherwise they will do too many mistakes. And they, of course, when they haven't worked there in the first place, need to be professionally qualified by you or external professional trainers. More than 100 million people, according to the World Economic Forum, can get into the workforce if we take a skills-first approach. The skills-first approach means you see that someone is able to do the job. You see that someone is willing to do the job. You move them into the field and then professionally qualify them. What you do not do is you move them into the field, push them in there and say, good luck from here, have high expectations and do low investments. That is a ticking time bomb in your organization. 100 million people can get into work by a skills-first approach. So adapt this as quickly as possible to your organization, because it is your job to do so. It is the employer's job to do so. The scarcity of talent and the scarcity of workforce and the scarcity maybe of other resources as well, just put a focus on employer. We know there were different times, and you happily accepted the times when it was completely different and the tables now turned. So please do not complain about what you see right now. You didn't address the possible positive situation that you had in the 90s, early 2000s, where you had an abundance of workforce you could choose from. You now have to live with the different wave. Every wave that goes up in your favor goes down against you. It's an up and down, and that will not stop. And by the way, if you think, oh, there is so much regulation, there's so much going on, and now this skills first approach, what's next? Well, when you are in the UK, you probably know this already. The UK now agreed on a law, and the law includes the right for flexibility. You have a right for flexible work from day one, not after 6 months as it was before, from day one. From day one, you have a right to work flexibly, work from home, maybe work from anywhere, depending on the legal situation of what you do and the possibilities, of course, of what you do. Of course, have flexible hours, which are compatible with either your family, your children, and what else might be necessary to be taken into account. The right for flexibility was agreed by an unreconstructed conservative government. So when they agree on such a law, I can tell you that this will arrive in many other countries as well. And by the way, when you now say, oh, in my country, they won't, there is a global workforce with remote work. So anyone with an internet access is able to leave your organization at the tip of their fingers with a couple of mouse clicks. So when you think you don't have to face the remote working world, you have to, because it is very important to see that globalization is not a one-way street. It means that you now have to look into what upskilling really is. And upskilling is a part of the future of work. Upskilling is the employer's task, and upskilling means that you proactively engage in getting better skills and more skills into the existing workforce, no matter how long they are with you. That applies for the people who are very new to your workforce as well to the people who are with you for 30 years. And by the way, if you now think, well, I'm taking the cheap approach, our so-called trainers are someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who does it for a couple of dollars cash in the hand. Good luck with that. Of course, people will leave your organization when you do not have professionally qualified trainers. Just to give you a rough guideline, senior professionals as a trainer roughly work for a daily rate from about $3,500. That is the general starting rate in Europe. In the US, it's a lot higher due to the cost of living, healthcare, the risk they have, etc. So when you buy anyone cheaper than that, you will not get any professional anywhere. And of course, your people know that, your people see that, they will talk about this and they will act accordingly. When you go cheap, they go cheap. When you expect a lot, you have to hire professionals because only then you can justify that you have high demands towards them. Upskilling means that you take a proactive approach on putting more skills, better skills, and extending the skills of your existing and future workforce. And the task to implement that is now. And while the time to implement that is now, you of course might have a couple of question marks now. And thank you very much for the last weeks where we received a lot of emails, or I received a lot of emails. Feel free to contact me anytime. nb@nb-networks.com is my email address. I will also put that in the show notes of this podcast. Feel free to send me any question and I will get back to you within 24 hours. I always answer messages within 24 hours. Of course, when you want to have something very specific, training, speaking, coaching on the matter or any matter around that topic or any other topic in the leadership area, let me know as well and we can have a chat from there. Besides my email address, I will also include my LinkedIn contact so we can get in contact there and then have a chat from there and answer any questions you might have. The second aspect, which I always recommend, is we have live sessions. And of course, we just had one a couple of weeks ago, which went very well. If you like to join for a live session, feel free to do so. It's available in English and German. So feel free to bring colleagues with you as well. expert.nb-networks.com. You can register your email address there. And as soon as you did so, you receive only one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content at free guarantee. And then we take it from there. And I look forward to being in touch with you. The third aspect, however, is the most important one. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive aspect of what you obviously want to see as a positive change in your organization, because otherwise you wouldn't sit here listening to me for the last 15 minutes. I wish you all the best. Let me know if I can help. I'm available for you 24/7. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.